quite a few Trump administration officials are criticizing the former president over his alleged mishandling of highly classified documents. One we have yet to hear from is Trump's former defense secretary, Mark Esper, who also served as Secretary of the Army. And joining us now is former Secretary Mark Esper. Secretary Esper, happy Father's Day.
Thanks, Jake. You too.
So let's start with the indictment of your former boss. You have plenty of experience handling classified documents as Secretary of Defense and Secretary of the Army. What was your reaction when you learned from the indictment that Trump had all these documents pertaining to very sensitive topics, classified topics, the country's nuclear programs, defense capabilities, vulnerabilities, just lying around Mar-a-Lago, in some instances showing them to people without classified clearance, allegedly? Do you think his actions put America's national security at risk?
Well, the revelations are very troubling, disturbing, and yes, I do. If the allegations are true that it contained information about our nation's security, about our vulnerabilities, about other items, it could be quite harmful to the nation. And look, no one is above the law. And so I think this process needs to play out and people held to account, the president held to account.
You work closely with Trump. I've heard two different theories as to why he had these documents. One from Stephanie Grisham, who said, he just likes, these are mine, and he's like a child with a toy. And one from Michael Cohen. He said he thought that Trump had these documents because he wanted to use them to further his own power or financial well-being in some way. Why do you think he held on to these documents and went to such lengths to stop them, to prevent them from being turned over to the government?
Yeah, look, I think both theories could be true and likely are true to some extent. Who knows? People have described him as a hoarder when it comes to these type of documents. But clearly it was unauthorized, illegal, and dangerous. And look, we have a case playing out right now in Massachusetts where that young airman from the Massachusetts National Guard is being charged on similar types of accounts under the Espionage Act for taking and retaining unauthorized documents that affected our national defense.
Based on your experiences working with the Trump and the actions alleged in the indictment, do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
Well, based on his actions, again, if proven true under the indictment by the special counsel, no. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk. You cannot have these documents floating around. They need to be secured. We know how that happens. That only authorized persons are allowed to see documents or receive information from documents. So look, we've got to take this very seriously. These are serious issues.
You understand the seriousness of this better than I do. Why is it a risk to the nation's security to have these documents lying around at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, imagine if a foreign agent, another country, were to discover documents that outline America's vulnerabilities or the weaknesses of the United States military. Think about how that could be exploited, how that could be used against us in a conflict, how an enemy could develop countermeasures, things like that. Or in the case of the most significant piece that was raised in the allegation about U.S. plans to attack Iran. Think about how that affects our readiness, our ability to prosecute an attack if indeed we know that Iran eventually develops a nuclear weapon and we need to act on it. I mean, those things affect our ability to effectively execute policy, and it could also affect, again, the lives of our military members who are sent forward to do such type of operation. So I'm quite concerned about this. These are very serious allegations and need to be taken seriously by everybody involved.
Two former top cabinet officials of Donald Trump sounding the alarm over his bid to return to the White House. Former Attorney General Bill Barr says that the federal indictment over Trump's handling of classified documents show that the former president will always put his own ego ahead of the country's interests. And former Defense Secretary Mark Esper says he believes Trump put the nation's military secrets and safety at risk if the allegations against him are proven. Listen to what Esper told CNN's Jake Tapper.
Based on your experiences working with the Trump and the actions alleged in the indictment, do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
Well, based on his actions, again, if proven true under the indictment by the special counsel, no. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
CNN's Elena Treen joins us now live in Washington. Elena, pretty striking comments. What do you make of them?
Well, they are very striking, Rahel. These are some of the starkest comments that we've heard, not just from these former Trump administration officials, but Republicans in general regarding the federal charges that the former president is facing. And both Mark Esper, his former defense secretary, and his former attorney general, Bill Barr, are saying that if he is convicted in this case and the charges against him are proven to be true, that Donald Trump should not be president again. And I think what Mark Esper said is really a dire warning if Donald Trump is reelected for a second term and is back in the White House. He said that what Donald Trump did was irresponsible and it put the lives of service members at risk. And as you said, Rahel, we also have heard some very strong criticism from former Attorney General Bill Barr. He's repeatedly gone on the airwaves to talk about these charges and the seriousness of them. And he said that the charges are damning and that Donald Trump is not a victim in this. Let's listen to what he told CBS News yesterday.
Would he put the country at risk if he was in the White House again?
He will always put his own interests and gratifying his own ego ahead of everything else, including the country's interests. There's no question about it. This is a perfect example of that. He's like, he's like a defiant 9-year-old kid who's always pushing the glass toward the edge of the table, defying his parents to stop him from doing it. It's a means of self-assertion and exerting his dominance over other people. And he's a very petty individual who will always put his interests ahead of the country's, his personal gratification of his, of his ego.
Now, Rahel, I think it's important to note that Bill Barr and Mark Esper were not just former Trump administration officials. They were cabinet-level secretaries and attorney general. And I think that, they also had access to some of the most highly sensitive materials that Donald Trump had when in office. And both of them had said that the documents that were in his possession were very classified and should have been in the hands of the National Archivists, should have not been taken back with him to Mar-a-Lago. Rahel.
Things getting very personal. Fascinating to hear A.G. Barr call him petty. Elena, has Donald Trump's team reacted or responded to any of this?
Well, obviously, Donald Trump's team is arguing something very different. I was in Bedminster when he returned from his arraignment in Miami last Tuesday and spoke to a crowd of supporters at his golf club in New Jersey. And he said that Donald Trump said that he believed he was entitled to taking these documents with him and that others were not prosecuted for doing the same thing. Of course, prosecutors in this case are arguing that the materials in his possession were some of the most classified documents and that his unwillingness to turn them over amounts to obstruction. But I think what's really striking about this is Republicans in Congress, as well as some of Donald Trump's 2024 presidential rivals, are kind of leaning into what Donald Trump is saying and the excuses he's making for having these materials, whereas Mark Esper and Bill Barr are not. And I think that's why it's very interesting to hear where they differ on this from the rest of the Republican Party. Rahel.
Elena Treen, live for us in Washington. Elena, thank you.